Vander Graad is probably the most interesting new character in the Saint Seiya Knights of the Zodiac Netflix series. So let's go in depth about him and let's discuss where he comes from, what he means, what's behind the scenes of his creation in this new edition of The Dragon's Waterfall, your source about Knights of the Zodiac. Vander Graad is the main antagonist in both halves of the first season of Knights of the Zodiac. He is introduced in episode 1, and throughout the series we discover that he used to be Arman's or Mitsumasa's, depending on the name organization, but he used to be Sienna's adoptive grandfather business partner. And their business was collecting and probably selling information, both to governments and private companies. We don't know exactly what type of information, but they mention information about wars and governments, so it's possible that they were almost in the spying business. Now, this all changes when, either by chance or by destiny, they come across Aios, the Sagittarius Knight, carrying away Sienna from the sanctuary. And of course, Sienna is in fact the reincarnation of Athena. Aios is gravely injured. We don't know whether Vander and Arman arrived there by chance, but it is said at one point that they researched what was going on, so it was possibly not a coincidence that they were in the Aegean Sea right when Aios was escaping the sanctuary. But regardless, they find the dying Aios, and he telepathically tells them about Athena. He entrusts Athena to them, together with his own gold armor. Now, Arman and Vander initially both agree to protect Athena, but then Vander starts investigating the goddess, and he finds out about the sanctuary and the history of the knights and so on. But he also finds out about a prophecy, according to which Athena, in this instance, will fail, and she will cause the destruction of the world against Hades and Poseidon. So he becomes convinced that humanity should not rely on gods to protect itself, and humans should fight on their own behalf. So, by researching the Sagittarius gold armor, right before Arman takes it away together with Sienna, he eventually begins the work that will result in the creation of the Black Knights. Now, there are a few moments throughout Vander's life that are implied here and there. For example, we know he doesn't have a Cosmo, but we also know that somehow he got in touch with the Phoenix Nero, and the two agreed to work together. We don't exactly know when or how this happened, but we know that when Nero is running away from the underground bunker where he fought against Seiya and the others, it's Vander who's providing him with vehicles, funds, foot soldiers, and so on. It's also said that at some point there was an explosion which caused a massive burn on the left-hand side of Vander's face. This burn is still clearly visible. It's a big scar covering most of his cheek and his eye, and his left eye is completely white. Again, we don't know whether he's blind from that eye, but it's heavily implied. Now, the interesting thing about Vander is that even though he's an antagonist, he has somewhat pure motives. He's not someone who wants to conquer the earth or to obtain power for himself, but quite the opposite. He wants to protect humankind. The only problem is that he is misguided, because due to this prophecy, he is convinced that Athena needs to be killed, otherwise humankind doesn't stand a chance. And because of this conviction, he eventually attacks and kidnaps Arman, and it starts a chain of events resulting in Arman's death. And Vander appears to be sincerely sorrowful, sincerely sad for Arman's death, and he even admits to Sienna that that's his own fault, and he will pay the consequences for it. However, despite feeling guilty for what happened, he is still convinced that he needs to kill Sienna in order to protect humankind, and he's almost ready to do so by himself. He's ready to kill her with a dagger in one occasion once she's her captive. And Sienna tries to talk him out of it, tries to offer a collaboration, a way for Knights and Vander's organization to work together, but he doesn't listen to a word of what she says. Eventually, Vander wears some sort of massive black armor, and he fights against the main characters, so Seiya, Wrong, Sean, and Magnus, and he's defeated. We don't know whether, for certain at least, whether he died or not, but it seems to be implied that he does indeed die at the end of Season 1. Now let's go a little bit in depth about Vander, because he's a character who does not exist in the canonical series, neither in the manga nor in the anime. However, several elements about him do come from several different characters in the original series. And first of all, his surname, his second name is Grad. And in the original manga, the big foundation, the company that Sienna and her grandfather before her ran, is called the Grad Foundation. And we never find out why it's called this way, because the original name of Arman is Mitsumasa Kido. He's been called Lord Nobu in the English edition of the manga, or Arman Kido here in the Netflix series. But in the original manga, it's the Grad Foundation. And we never find out where this name comes from, whether it was indeed from an old business partner, or whether it's just a symbolic name that Mitsumasa chose for the company. Also, Vander looks like he dresses like a general, and as I said, he has this massive burn on the left side on his face. And this burn is very reminiscent of Django, and Django is a character I've already talked about in another video about original canonical characters missing from the Netflix series. Django was the leader of the Black Knights in the original series, and he lived on Death Queen Island, which is where Ikki Nero had his training. So we can see that there was a connection between Django and Ikki and the Black Knights. However, this is where the connection ends, because whereas Vander is a businessman, a researcher, and a little bit of a scientist, Django was basically just a strongman who used to rule the Black Knights with fear, even though they were actually a little bit stronger than him. Another characteristic of Vander is indeed to be a scientist, and he seems to be partially based also on Dr. Asamori. And Dr. Asamori is an anime-only character from the original series, and he is the creator of the original Steel Knights. And the Steel Knights have much in common with the current Knights of the Zodiac Black Knights, because they are also knights created by science and based on science. So they are unable to burn their Cosmo, they don't even have their own Cosmo, but they have special armors which sort of make up for it. And the original Steel Knights are created by Arman and Professor Asamori, to help Sienna and her Bronze Knights against the Sanctuary. There are only 3 original Steel Knights in the original series, but recently the Saint Seiya Omega sequel has created an entire army of them. Now, Professor Asamori is a minor character, but he's someone who used to be Alman's friend and confidant, and he kept on working on fusing together knights and science until he created the Steel Knights. So you can see how it's a little bit different, but also quite similar with what Vander does, using his own research and the Sagittarius gold armor to create the black armors and eventually the Black Knights. So it looks really like Vander has been created by combining elements of Django and Professor Asamori, and also taking the name of this Graad Foundation, about which we don't know much. Now, we don't know for certain whether Vander died or survived, and we don't know yet whether he will be back in Season 2 of the Netflix series. Personally, I quite liked him, because he offered something different, and he was an interesting type of antagonist, being quite selfless in his own way and trying to protect humankind, even though he was quite misguided about Sienna and Athena. So it would be interesting to see him again, even though in terms of power the Black Knights and the Black Armors won't really be capable of much against the Sanctuary and the Golden Knights. And in a way, the arcs of Knights of the Zodiac that revolved around him were probably a little bit weaker than the rest, and not being based on the original story. But regardless, it would be interesting to see him come back in the future and possibly join forces with Sienna and use science to support the Knights instead of trying to kill them all. So this is it for this edition of Knights in Depth. As usual, like the video, join the channel, subscribe, talk about Saint Seiya with your friends, and keep watching this show. Now take care of yourselves and each other. Bye bye.